Hello, everyone. Welcome to Gen AI Con. Delighted to have here with us Thomas Hirschman, who is the CEO of Core Cortex and focuses on the behavioral economy. What I'm really looking forward to discussing today is how AI can be used to help with sustainability and maybe exploring a bit the environmental impact of AI, how we can deal with things like greenwashing, and how we can scale AI and still remain sustainable. So over to you, Thomas. Thank you so much for joining us here today.
Thank you, Francesca. Thanks for the kind intro. Yeah, since I have only half an hour, I think I'm going to be jumping right into my presentation, if that's all right. If there's any questions, please don't hesitate to just ask or jump right in, and we can have a bit of a discussion, if that makes sense. Okay, I'm just trying to share my screen. So let me know if you can see my screen.
Yes, perfect. Aligning AI.
Perfect. Okay, right. So this might be in the context that I understand this whole webinar seminar going to be in today, going to be a bit critical because I'm going to be talking about the limitations of artificial intelligence, but also our very own limitations of human intelligence. And this is where a concept comes in that I call intelligence of nature or natural intelligence, NI, which is in fact the basis of everything that we could potentially call intelligent, and that is also challenging the way I think we interact and understand intelligent behavior when it comes to ourselves, human beings, obviously. I don't think you're gonna spend too much time about talking about AI and what has happened, because I think everyone who's attending this webinar is probably aware that a lot has changed since last November, when ChatGPT came on the market and created a bit of an hype indeed. And I think that's when people realized that artificial intelligence is actually a thing. It's not going to go away. It's pretty much the new standard of processing large amounts of data and opening up new opportunities. So what I'm trying to do today is I try to walk you in 5 steps through what I think is necessary and bound to happen when it comes to overcoming the limitations that we are currently still seeing in artificial intelligence, but also, as I said, in our own very own human intelligence. I will do that by pointing out those limitations first, and my first agenda point, then going into comparing human intelligence with artificial intelligence, and my second point. And from that comparison, directly coming into introducing the concept of natural intelligence and what's required to change our mindset to incorporate this kind of broader thinking about what intelligence is and how nature can help us understand. Right, let's do it. So I think, first of all, I just wanted to remind people that the limitations of the understanding of what intelligence actually means is quite deep-seated, is deep-rooted. This goes down to the very beginning of artificial intelligence thinking. In fact, if you ever read the original Turing paper from 1950, you understood that the kind of imitation game that Turing introduced, which is now known as the Turing test, is basically just a way of avoiding the question of having to define intelligence in the first place, right? So Turing said, he said not like, let's define intelligence like that, which you could obviously assume, as he has published in a paper called Psychology and Philosophy, or Mind Quarterly, were in the section Psychology and Philosophy, which is quite interesting because obviously Turing, being more of a technician and being well known for being the father of artificial intelligence from a technological point of view. Now, having understood that, he's basically operationalized artificial intelligence thinking as a way of you're not knowing whether you are actually, in fact, dealing with a human or a machine, is almost a way of like acknowledging that he didn't really know how to define artificial intelligence or intelligence in the first place. So what he did is just like introduce this, smart way of assuming that we can say that something is intelligence if it can fool us into thinking it's human. Interesting. Right. Of course, I don't want to argue that this is not a big step forward that we're seeing in artificial intelligence research right now. I am definitely acknowledging that we're dealing here with a general purpose technology, much like electricity, the computer, the internet, or much further back, the steam engine. So it will have a big impact on us. But the question is just in what way, in what direction do we want this impact to become reality, right? And this is what this our presentation is all about. Now, first of all, why this is very critical, AI is for the first time not just exposing kind of blue collar workers, it's exposing the kind of work and the kind of workers, or the kind of people in their jobs that are doing high paid, well trained, analytical and creative work, right? So it has a massive transformative pressure. It adds transformative pressure specifically onto these industries that are working with data and information, who are working with their minds, right? Which obviously means that we need to redefine who we are as human beings and what we do, where we add value, specifically when it comes to creative tasks, and understand where that creativity comes from and what it actually is, right? So what I'm saying is AI exposing the ill-defined understanding that we ourselves have of our own mental activity and our own mental capacity as we define it as intelligence, or we don't define it, right? So this is what's happening. And this has a massive impact on marketing itself. There has been a paper just come out by MIT that is basically saying that consumers actually perceive the quality of ad copy generated by AI to be higher on average than the one generated just by humans. And that means obviously, if you're working in marketing, again, you have to ask yourself the question, where do I add value? Where do I fit in as a human being? Right. There's much more where this comes from. The research that is basically looking into the productivity enhancement capabilities of AI. So I don't have the time to go into all of that research in all detail, but I'm more than happy to help you understand what it means if you want to delve deeper, specifically about the consequences, what that means about, like, when you're adopting AI,
Yes,
what do I
maybe,
have
maybe
to
we can
do?
come back to this at the end. And it'd be great for you to explain this graph in a bit more detail. Thank you.
Sure. Yeah. So in consequence, the key point that I'm making here is that with all the hype about AI, what still counts is people. People will be at the heart of successful use of AI, and this comes down to willingness to learn and critically reflect about how we want to apply AI. So this is my starting point to kind of the critical reflection that I want to take you on, kind of a journey of. And the critical reflection starts with a provocative statement where I'm saying that AI is basically cognitive cocaine, right? And this is, meant to be provocative because it's cognitive cocaine for the kind of people who do not reflect, who are just thinking about, what we should be doing is just increasing productivity. So here we are, we have these wonderful tools and they can increase the output of what we're doing, and it's all going to be amazing, right? Now, if you haven't kind of tracked the irony in my words, then let me spell this out, kind of very, very articulate for you. Yes, there is a huge potential for tremendous positive productivity effects, but that also means that, you know, uh, giving AI tools to people who just want to do business as usual and just want to believe in unlimited growth is a dangerous thing because it is bound to fail yeah, on a planet with limited resources, right? It's also bound to fail because it's not a viable goal in the first place. It's not something that in any way helps us get to a place with better living conditions, where the quality of life increases. It's just a way of increasing the quantity of products and services being generated, and again, having massive negative consequences from a planetary point of view. This kind of throws me back to the underlying core problem being the ill understood concept of intelligence that we're using when we're dealing with artificial intelligence or our own intelligence when it comes to that matter. So there is a massive instrumental undertone in the way that intelligence is being defined. Here's a definition, a working definition by the APA, saying that it's the ability to derive information, learn from experiments, adapt to the environment, understand and correctly utilize thought and reason. Now, what is not saying that definition is to what end are we using that these capabilities? To what end? To what goal? Why are we doing this, right? And this is the key question that's kind of like missing in the whole conversation and the whole discussion about artificial intelligence because it's implicit in what's happening. Consequently, you find on the web also, and here's a source of MIT, new suggestions of a Turing test, specifically as it is being said that the Turing test has actually been broken right now. We can't differentiate anymore between human and AI generated content or chat content, for example. So one suggestion for a new kind of Turing test is like by MIT expert Solomon. He says like, we could check if AI can make $1 million, right? And I've seen the dollar note on the background of Frankie's screen earlier that reminded me of exactly that kind of way of defining intelligence. Yes, there is a way of instrumental intelligence that's just like thinking about how can it make me more money, right? Of course, yeah. But the problem is obviously, generating more money on a global scale, again, is potentially an unsustainable way of thinking. So what I'm saying here is that there is a general bias that is influencing our way of understanding intelligence in the first place, and that is well known in behavioral sciences and behavioral economics, right? Like everyone knows about these biases, and everyone knows that they usually arise from information processing shortcuts, limited processing ability of the brain, emotional and moral aspects of thinking, distortions when it comes to memory retrieval and storage or social influence. But all these biases are pointing to something much larger, and they're pointing to something that is, if you think about it more, that's potentially saying that we are not rational animals in the first place. We are not rational beings. We are highly irrational creatures. and the basic assumption that we are all just intelligent, rational, and striving for something that is objectively a goal worth striving for, that might be wrong. So if you're looking into, for example, evolutionary biological research, specifically about the social brain hypothesis by Robin Dunbar, you end up with a quite different understanding of intelligence. You actually understand that our brain has not evolved to be intelligent in the first place. Not evolved to be intelligent that in the sense that it understands highly complex relationships. It's optimized for its survival value, for its survival value against energy efficiency. That's what the brain is, right? And actually, then you understand that the intelligence that our brain renders is just a byproduct. Is a byproduct of the need to compute the social complexity that comes from how we evolved as human beings, right? As kind of these highly social creatures, social animals that we are. Right. There's much more, critical reflection if you wanted to look into why, or how we ended up in this kind of capitalistic way of thinking that we only look for intelligence to be that thing that makes us more money. But in the end, it's really a way of, and Csikszentmihalyi, this psychologist who invented flow, he puts that quite nicely. He said it all comes down to understanding who we are and where we come from, right? And as long as you don't understand that, there's not much hope for that reflection to even start. This brings me right into, the comparison between our human and the artificial intelligence as it exists right now. The first thing that we know from, data or, sources that we might be able to trust, for example, the World Economic Forum, is that the boundary between human and machine, the human-machine frontier, is changing. So it means that in future, and this is like very likely prediction, obviously, everyone can understand that more work will be done by machines compared to how the boundary is set up right now. So the question, obviously, the consequence from that is the question is that coming from that is, what does that mean for us? How do we have to redefine ourselves as human workers, human data or knowledge workers specifically? Again, there is the undeniable truth that you will be more productive with using AI, right? So why not just adopting it? But there is also something that's called automation neglect, and this is coming from a study from using AI, AI being used by radiologists, so in the medical area. So there might also be a point where humans almost deny the advantage that AI brings in favor of their own version of reality, which again, obviously, might be informed by biases and bottom line by maybe there's just a need of humans to hang on to some kind of work. And this brings me to the essence of what is, I think, what is happening right now with the introduction of AI is not just the danger of degrading information. If you've read this paper in the New York Times, ChatGPT is a blurry JPEG of the web. You understand what I mean? It's an epistemological challenge. So what I'm talking here is the epistemology of AI. So just to explain, epistemology is the concept of where knowledge actually comes from, and this is changing due to the introduction of artificial intelligence. To explain what I mean, I want to use a metaphor used by the philosopher Luca di Biase, and he said, like, imagine that you are at a dinner party, right? And someone is talking about this fancy new book that just came out, and everyone's saying something about it. And so someone asks you, have you read this book? And of course you haven't read this book, so you just want to pretend and fit in, right? So you, although you haven't read this book, you heard maybe, two sentences on the radio about it, so you say, yeah, of course I read it, and then you kind of pretend, that you go on and say something about the book that you want to sound kind of sensible, meaningful. And this is exactly what ChatGPT is doing, or what artificial is doing right now, is basically a very skilled bullshitter, if you want, right? Like, it's basically a way of using large amounts of data to come up with something that sounds about right, and is able to blend in a way that we humans, we project something meaningful into these sentences or these words generated by artificial intelligence. Um, but the problem comes when you kind of try to dig deeper into the epistemological aspects of it. And here I'm quoting Richard Feynman, the famous physicist, where he's using this example of someone seeing a bird, and then you try to recall the name of this bird, and obviously this bird might have different names in different languages, right? And the problem with even if you know the name of the bird is that you still don't know the very first thing about what this bird actually does, and how its behavior, or what how it functions, right? And this brings me to the essence of this epistemological crisis that we're in, or this epistemological problem that we are thrown into as human beings with AI. It's the differentiation between knowing and understanding, right? Everyone seems to be knowing something, but very, very few people actually understand. And one thing is for sure, AI doesn't understand. AI doesn't understand the very first thing, because it doesn't understand causality. It lacks the very basic of how understanding even works, right? This is what it comes down to, and this is why I'm kind of thrown off of this metaphor of for AI, the electric bike for the mind, because yes, it can increase the productivity of whatever you generate, but it can't increase the understanding of what you're trying to deal with, right? So uh, it's a quite funny way to get to the bottom of things. Now, to if you wanted to delve deeper, obviously there's more material, and this is just like something by Jan LeCun, the head of AI of Meta. He puts it that way, that he said, like, yes, AI can generate kind of texts that sound meaningful, but actually only humans understand how the world works, and AI, in effect, can't predict consequences of any actions, can't perform chain of reasoning, and can't uh, uh, decompose complex tasks. So this means there's a long way until we get from the current state of AI to something that is actually intelligent. Right. Um, so in a way, what we can say is AI is superhuman in very narrow domains, but it still lacks the general thinking abilities of humans. Now, I'm just jumping over this, and there's obviously much to be said about how we could create an actually intelligent machine, and what it takes from a cognitive point of view, which again, I think goes far beyond this talk. So we would have to spend more time discussing and thinking about this. Which brings me right into the core aspect of where we stand with AI technology, as with every technology. And I don't know whether you guys are familiar with Greek mythology, with Hermes, for example, the mythical figure who was said to be the inventor of technology. Yes, technology can be a massively creative achievement, but it can also draw risks and dependencies, generate a lot of dependency. So we're relying more and more on that technology. And this becomes even more true when it comes to technology that comes closer to our very own abilities to think and reason, and that's where we are. Right, this brings me right into the third point of my talk. Where's the exit? Where's the way out? How can we find a way out of this kind of challenge in which we are finding ourselves in when it comes to dealing with artificial intelligence that's not really intelligent, right? Well, my suggestion is looking at nature, looking at the intelligence that nature has already produced over hundreds of millions of years of evolution. And the fantastic thing is that you don't even need a centralized nervous system to see animals acting intelligently, right? So you see here, for example, some jellyfish that show the ability to learn and to adapt to their environment based on cues to avoid collision, even without a brain present. You can also look into different types of intelligence, like that of octopuses, who are highly intelligent creatures who have about 300 to 500 million nerve cells, so almost as much as a dog, but can solve complex problems that even children can't solve. For example, opening a childproof bottle. Um, and they show almost like a distributed sense of self because they have more nerve cells in their arms than they have in their brain. So again, maybe an inspiration for us to think about, there's completely different forms of intelligence to us, but they can also be understood as intelligent. Or, for example, insects like the bees, honeybees, right? They are able to make fast and accurate decisions when it comes to deciding which flowers to fly to. And it's been shown that they have a form of sentience and even have a primitive form of a consciousness and can have subjective experiences, right? And there's even something like collective intelligence of a whole beehive there. So for me, this is highly interesting because it shows a way out of the trap in which we are right now with the transformer models and large language models that have been guiding the intelligence research so far. Because what it comes down to is energy. So nature has a way of not wasting any energy. And this seems to be an interesting path forward for us to understand how we could potentially optimize or even create a new way of artificial intelligence that goes far beyond the abilities of what our technology can do today. This is again some research from Jan LeCun, head of AI at Meta, who's supporting this view of an energy-based view of intelligence that can be extremely useful. There is even new thinking about creating nerve cells or creating computer chips that you could call neuromorphic, that are basically inspired by our very own brain and the nerve cells, and if you want to put it, nature's way of creating intelligence. One way of doing that is combining the memory function and the cognition function into one substrate. And this is called memristor research within biomorphic computing, a very interesting approach and something that we probably going to see more of in the coming years. And there's some research saying that any neural network that minimizes energy usage will implement predictive processing. So in other ways, uh, how nature invented prediction is basically by just being energy efficient, right? And if you want to know more about how that works, then do let me know and contact me. We can discuss that. So the fourth point and the most critical one before we can, maybe discuss the implications of all of that a bit more for me is the mindset. Because what's holding us back, I think, is just our very own, or outdated and traditional way of thinking. So I try to portray that with this visual where I say, like, on the right hand side, you see all this kind of solution focused thinking. And this is, I think, what's happening right now. A lot of people are fascinated by AI, they're fascinated by ChatGPT and all the AI tools out there. So they just want to, ride the wave and leverage the ensuing efficiency boost for whatever they do, right? Without kind of wanting to reflect and think more, which is here depicted on the left side. However, I think the more we will have these efficiency boosts and AI tools that can quickly create solutions, the more we have to ask ourselves the question, which problems do we actually want to solve in the first place, right? And this, I think, is part of our current mindset. And this is where our current mindset has potentially also become part of the problem, right? Where our lack of understanding, beginning with our lack of understanding of our very own intelligence and the limitations thereof, has created a way of us focusing only on doing more and doing things faster, more efficiently, rather than even asking the question, what should we do in the first place, right? And this is reminding us that ChatGPT or any other AI tool, it's just a tool, right? It doesn't tell you what to do. So asking the question of what should be your goal of what you're doing should be first, right? As a tool, like any kind of thousands of years old stone axe, which I depicted here, like obviously a bit provocative. So what we need to do is, in my view, we need to let nature help us create a nature-based thinking and a nature-informed mindset where we think about more about the interconnections between, humans, between the environment in which we're living and the organizational structures that we create. We need to even kind of think about creating a nature-informed AI in the first place, because and this is quite nice, um, you know. Uh, and having nature without AI is absolutely fine, but having AI without nature, that is a state in which we human beings will not survive. Right. So what I'm saying is we need a change in mindset, and this is informed by a prominent thinker in the area of sustainability, Daniel Christian Wahl, um, who's saying that we need to fundamentally redesign human presence and impact on Earth, and we need to enable people to cooperate and create a kind of shared abundance rather than this kind of competitive scarcity thinking that we rely on right now. Now, the question obviously that ensues from that is, how do we do that? And one way of thinking would be to focus more on what nature can teach us, not just about how to, make technology faster, but how to live better, right? To inform an intelligence that is more profound, that is deep and has substance, and with regard to the impacts that's having on us and on and our fellow human beings and all life on this planet. Now here we are, and I have come up with a couple of ideas of potentially how we could achieve that. There's a lot of discussion that I'm having with interesting and intelligent people in this area right now, and I'm more than happy to have these conversations with you, of course, as well.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. I do have a couple of questions. I'm not sure how long you have. But my first set of questions are to understand intelligence in a bit more depth, and then the second group of questions are more about the possibilities and opportunities here. So just to delve into the intelligence side, when I look at conversational AI, there's essentially two groups. There's one which are chatbots and they're rule based. So you ask a question and it's going to give you exactly the answer that has been predetermined. And then you've got LLMs and conversational AI, which hallucinates, but it can be more empathetic. It can mirror the person that it's speaking to, and so on and so forth. And the two things can be put together for better communication. In what ways is that like the brain, where you've got the left side of the brain and the right side of the brain working together to give you to communicate?
Phew. Well, first of all, the left side, right side brain differentiation is mostly a myth. So if you look into neuroscience, you will find that yes, there's the Broca and Wernicke area, which is informing speech, and that is more lateralization like on the left side. But generally, the whole brain is intricately working together as a whole. So conscience, for example, consciousness is something that is a resulting emergent phenomenon that more only can emerge through cortical activity distributed all over the brain. Well, that said, what you're referring to is potentially a development that we're seeing right now in artificial intelligence research, where people are trying to, let's say, debias the LLM-based hallucinations through expert knowledge. So where you have your own data sets and you create guardrails for how the LLM should interact with that knowledge to ensure that the output is actually correct, right? Behind that, there's obviously a deeper truth that the question of what is correct is and cannot fundamentally be defined, right? This is the epistemological question that I have been referring to, that we humans over centuries have always pushed knowledge forward. Now, with the training data that LLMs have been trained on, like let's say ChatGPT on the internet until 2021, that obviously represents the state of knowledge of humans, well, as far as it has published on the web, up to that point. But if you would restrict um, our knowledge only to that, that would obviously be massively detrimental to our progress as human beings, right? So what we want is we want an AI system that is able to interact with human beings on the quest to generate new knowledge and push the frontiers of knowledge further. And this is heavily relying on subject matter experts and on people who are able to differentiate something that is true or untrue based on context. So what I'm saying is, if you want to understand that matter further, please look into Gödel's second theorem. Gödel has been a mathematician, and he has published a series of theorems that Einstein has referred to. So this is something that is at the very kind of edge of epistemology.
Great. And then as social species, we've learned to cooperate, but also compete. And if we're to look at our, different civilizations and ages, and to go back to the Middle Ages, those times were particularly violent, where we're, competing. And the idea of enlightenment and progress is that we're becoming more intelligent, potentially more peaceful. In what ways does that reflect, your understanding of intelligence? Does intelligence make you more cooperative and more social?
That's again a very interesting question. So yes, I agree. On the outside, it looks like humans as a species have made tremendous progress, and there's obviously the age of enlightenment that has been referenced to that end many times. But on the other hand, obviously, you still see wars breaking out today, and this is the context that we're living in as human beings. Uh, we are ultimately, we have a very good software, if you want to refer to all the knowledge that we have learned over the centuries, but our hardware is actually the same. Evolutionarily speaking, we are still Stone Age people, right? Like we still have these kind of violent urges and these basic uh, primal needs that we can't escape due to our biology. So I think it's a constant battle between the two, and is based on the very own the power of reflection that we can enact that will decide which direction we can take this, right? So I have hope, yes, of course, but hope is not something that is scientific or can scientifically be proven. Um, uh, I think it's as you said, the cooperation is our only chance forward, and is in our enlightened self-interest. And I want to introduce this concept for everyone to think about it. I think it's not that we have become less violent. We still massive assholes as human beings. Sorry to put this bluntly, but some people have learned that our lives get better if we behave less like assholes. Like because of the social nature of our species, cooperation is actually good for everyone.
Wonderful. And then if you were to ask someone a question about their beliefs, for example, do you believe in God? And then you were to ask, "Oh, why do you believe that?" They might have some evidence, but they might have been taught that, and they don't necessarily know the origins of that belief system. And over years and years and years, the belief system becomes more and more entrenched. Um, so if we're to look at fine tuning AI or with bias and explainable AI, where you ask AI to make a decision and then you ask it to explain why it's made that decision and from what sources of information, that's something that researchers are working on at the moment. But how does that actually work? And are humans also able to explain um, their thought processes?
Absolutely. So I think you again pointing out a very good approach to checking the validity of whatever we base our decisions on. You have to really push to the very edge of understanding to you. We should always ask the question, where is this coming from, right? Like we should also try to dig deeper. And this is basically down to the 2,000-year-old Socratic method, right? Just continue to ask why, and you will end up at some point where people will either stop and will not be able to explain to you why they're doing what they're doing, or they will end up at some kind of silly explanation, right? That is potentially not the grounds, cannot be the grounds of any kind of the basis of any kind of critical decision making. So yes, decision chains is something that has been used in AI research quite successfully, and I think it's going to be helpful. And this is again, for me, getting to the point of real value of AI, because real value of AI for me is more like a mirror for my own thinking. It's not that I want to rely on some artificial intelligence to tell me what to do or to tell me how to think. I want to use it as a mirror to better understand my own reasoning. And I want to make sure that my own reasoning is sound, and I want to be challenged, right? But unfortunately, not everyone wants to be challenged in the first place, because thinking is hard and thinking costs you time and it costs you energy. So I really hope for finding the people who enjoy this process of being challenged.
Yes, one of the areas that I'm particularly interested in is neurodiversity because I don't have dyslexia. I've tried, I've done all the tests, but I'm definitely, somewhere there on the spectrum. School wasn't really for me. Wasn't particularly good at exams. So I really look forward to unlocking some of these mysteries. One other area, so now kind of talking more about the possibilities. So when it comes to communication, AI is really good at communicating and deciphering code and language. So fantastic for all of our different languages around the world. But then if we're looking into species, animals and plants, and who knows if there are extraterrestrials out there, in what ways could AI help us to communicate with those other species?
Well, again, I think it's a great idea, and it comes down to what communication actually is. Now, again, I would like to start with something quite provocative that is not my idea, but came forward at a conference that I attended, where a linguist was talking to me. So that linguist told me that the main truth about communication is that we don't understand each other. So you have to kind of turn the whole idea on its head that language is for understanding. So what that means is, Francesca, we're talking here all the time. We are exchanging words, but the reason why we exchange words is because we hope that at some point we reach an understanding, but the continuation of this process, this dialogue that we're having, shows that we are not, right? So we're still grappling with our different perceptions of reality. So having understood that no one understands anyone, where language is just like basically the manifestation of not understanding rather than understanding, then that this gets you to the very point of what you might have alluded to when it comes to neurodiversity. The way that your brain works is differently to how my brain works, is to different to how anyone else's brain works. And if you're looking down to interspecies communication, you might have to look into something very, very different. And again, nature has its fantastic way to enlighten us here, because Amos Zahavi, an Israeli biologist, he very early on, for example, tried to answer the question about true signaling. How can an animal know that a signal that it receives holds some truth? Independently of the language, but obviously the language in which animals talk talk is different to our way of talking, right? So the way that Amos Zahavi solved that problem is that he said it's all about uh, honest signaling being a reflection of the energy that this signal holds, right? Again, it comes down to energy, and he uses the peacock as an example. So everyone knows how a peacock looks like, with this kind of fantastic wheel, and the colorful wheel that it has. And the reason of this wheel is obviously to signal to the peahen, I am a genetically good animal. Look at me. I'm looking so shiny, fantastic, right? Um, I must have good genes. And the reason why the peahen believes that signal is it can see it, and it was costly. It's costly signaling. That's what Amos Sahabi said. Because the peacock would be better off without this wheel, right? It's actually quite attractive also to predators. It can't run very fast with it. It's complete waste, right? But you have to go have expend that energy to really have this costly signal for some other party to understand that you mean business. This is honest, this is a true signal. So I would say AI, if it would be informed by natural intelligence by nature, it would be capable to understand these patterns. It would be capable to help us understand what is truth and what is just an epiphenomenon or not relevant. I don't know whether that answers all your questions, specifically
Yes,
not
no,
about
no, it does. Thank you so much.
extraterrestrial.
And I've always found the natural world very inspiring. And going back to when I was studying biology and the systems of, say, a biodiverse system like the Amazon rainforest, there are so many interconnections there, and everything is, you reduce the predators, and everything is in sort of checks and balances. And I also learnt about this through permaculture and a new form of farming that takes into account biodiversity and these sorts of things. And I think one thing that humans can be very selfish, or they think about themselves or their generation, or and maybe just the next generation. Um, do you think AI, again, in terms of some of the possibilities, could help us look more at our actions and the causality of our actions, and the effects kind of globally, and help us become more sustainable as species?
Absolutely. I firmly believe that from a reflection point of view, AI has the ability to help us uncover these unsustainable consequences of our actions. But again, that requires us to want to do that in the first place, or to have a mindset that is open to see these consequences of our actions, right? And I think this comes down to what you said earlier, where you said, like, we are all stuck in our very own belief systems, right? Like everyone has their way of kind of explaining the world, right? Like everyone has a way of maybe even have blinders on your day to day, because you need to get to the end of the day, because you are stuck in a job where your boss wants you to do something, and during the day you don't have time to reflect why they want you to do that, and at the end of the day it might just be about bottom line, right? Like increasing the revenue and so on. But ultimately, I see specifically among younger people a greater interest in nature and sustainability, and I think they're beginning to understand that there will be no next generation if we don't start to think now, right? And if you actually, get to that point of reflecting beyond your own existence, right? When you're starting to think about what's going to happen after me, like when I'm dead, I don't know, the world obviously will still be there. So, what do I leave behind, right? Um, Not very many people, like to think this way, because it's not very pleasant, maybe, to think about your own death. But yeah, it might still be relevant to adopt a view where you want to feel good at the end of your life, thinking back about what you have achieved. And I, for one, want to achieve something where I can help future generations achieve a balanced interrelationship with nature, or even, have a chance of survival for that matter, where climate change hasn't already kind of done the job of rendering the world inhabitable.
Wonderful. Well, those were fantastic. I'd love to hear your closing thoughts, but just on that last comment, I feel like that's the essence of the ego. That the ego is here to protect ourselves, and the way to move from maybe ego to altruism is to think about our own death and our legacy, and have those thoughts, and that can help move us in the right direction. But do you have any closing thoughts for any listeners?
My only closing thought would be, enjoy nature, and enjoy the moment of awe that nature is providing whenever you take time to look close enough. For example, I have started to become quite fascinated by bees. Whenever I have time, I spend time with bees, and I want to I observe them, and I look at their behavior, and the more I look, the more I discover how fantastic they are. Although they have incredibly tiny brains, right? They have like a couple of hundreds, or a couple of thousands of nerve cells only, and we are so much more intelligent. But still, bees have been on this planet for 450 million years, and they will probably still be there when we're long gone. Um, so I'm urging people to think a little bit beyond their own ego, if you want, and I think this can make us very happy.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much. It was a very inspiring talk, and really very enlightening. Do you have any books that you could recommend for anyone who wants to delve deeper on the subject?
Yeah, I have a long literature list. So yeah, if
Okay,
you want to
we'll
get in
visit
touch,
your
and
link.
happy to share. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much and have a lovely
Thank
day.
you, Frankie, for having me.